Thank you, Jonathan. All right. Great. So again, we'll give it a few more minutes, but those of you that are here, nice and on time, thank you. If you could put your name, company, and email in the chat, that would be wonderful. And I'll tell you who I am when we start. My colleague just told me I'm spotlighted now, and I was like, I can see that. My face is very large on the screen right now. Thank you, Laura. I'm sure all of you have been in this spot where you plan a party and you hope people come. This is very exciting, I have to tell you. Lots of folks on the call. So. All right, Laura, so before we begin, I just want to acknowledge our Chief Workforce Officer for the state of Connecticut, Kelly Marie Valeries, who is on the call with us and oversees the Office of Workforce Strategies, who is sponsoring this RFP. Kelly, would you like to just say a quick hello, and then we'll jump into things?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for your interest in this RFP. We're really excited about the work that we've done with Career Connect and are really looking forward to understanding what the outcomes are in a more comprehensive way. And hence, this is the opportunity to get this work done, and hopefully it will inform us for best practices moving forward. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, it's 2:05. Let's start the presentation mode. Thank you, Laura. All right. Are you all seeing the PowerPoint?
Not yet, Christina.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Great. All right. Terrific. Thank you, Laura. Okay. So we do have a hefty agenda, but again, a important one to get through this. And hopefully all of you at the end of this will be interested in submitting a response to the RFP. And I think it'll be a great opportunity. I'm very excited, as Kelly said, my role as Grants Performance Manager. My name is Dr. Christina Testabuzzi. And as the Grants Performance Manager, I've been with the Office of Workforce Strategies for about 9 months now, and very excited to be working with our program managers that are on the call, that are running, our program manager that runs the grant, Career Connect, to dig in, help support our grantees, and now have the opportunity to work with a third-party evaluator. So I do want to, as you can see, the agenda is on the call. Just going to call out some of my colleagues on the call. obviously everything, I'm sure many of you have been to these bidder conferences before. You know, everything that we'll talk about is in the RFP, which I anticipate all of you have read. And so I will be obviously reinforcing some of what's on that RFP, and also then providing some additional content where necessary and appropriate. So talk about the summary, the purpose, the eligibility, a program overview of Career Connect. I think that'll be important. Proposal outline. We're going to focus on the scope of service in the proposal outline. Briefly talk about the budget overview, share with you and go over the evaluation criteria and the weighting we'll be using. Important dates, always, deadlines always are important, and our submission requirements. And then we will leave time for some Q&A on this call. But as you all know, and as stated in the RFP, any additional questions and questions maybe we can't answer in full today, we will make sure we've recorded them, hence the recording, and answered them and have that available and sent out on September 27th. So any additional questions after today, please make sure you have them in next week by Friday. And then the following week, all the questions and answers will be posted. Okay. And again, if you're just joining us, please make sure you put your name, your company, and your email in the chat so that we can issue the follow-up materials. Go ahead, Laura. So I've already introduced myself. Nice to see you all. You can wave when I call you. We'll be hearing today from Sarah Bourdon, our Career Connect grant manager, Laura Baker, our workforce specialist and office administrator, and Christine Caminito, director of finance. Our office obviously has a very robust staff led by Kelly, who you've already heard from. And I want to acknowledge my other colleagues on the call today: Grace Sue, Chief of Staff; Tracy Ariel, Director of Business and Workforce Engagement; Jonathan Richter, Research Analyst; Lindsay Lung, our Staff Attorney; Dominique Johnson, our Grant Secretary; Michelle Furman, who is also a grants manager for our Good Jobs Challenge that we have. And I'm making sure I have not missed anyone, right?
I think Karen's on.
Karen, yes, thank you. Karen Quinsnell, thank you for joining us. Prior to myself and Sarah joining, Karen and my colleague Tracy Ariel were really managing the day-to-day operations of Career Connect. So their historical perspective will, of course, be helpful for the evaluator in the long run. So thank you. All right, so moving forward. Okay. And I do have two screens running, so if I look away, it's just because I'm looking at my cheat sheet. All right. And Laura, I want to just confirm, if there are any questions that come up as I'm speaking, they should be put in the chat, correct? Yes.
You can certainly put them in the chat, but know that there's going to be time for Q&A at the end.
Yep.
I think the only just quick housekeeping thing, if you don't mind, real quick, Christina, before we get going, I'm seeing a couple messages come across as encrypted in the chat, so I can't actually read your message. So if you are here and you're coming across as encrypted, I'm going to drop Christina's email in the chat. Please email Christina. We'll then have your name, your company, and all that information. So Randall, Angela, and John Brower, if you don't mind, please, I'm going to give you Christina's email. Please email Christina and let us know that you're here, and remind us that you're here. Your stuff's coming across as encrypted for some reason, and I can't see.
Great. Thank you, Laura.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So obviously, again, most of this taken from the RFP itself. We're very excited to have a third-party evaluator come and take a look and a deep dive into the Career Connect program to assess its impact on our participants and their transition into the labor market. We really are looking at the participants, so the individuals who have been trained or upskilled and placed, as well as how this transformative program and quite large investment of ARPA dollars to the state of Connecticut has impacted the grantees. And my colleague Sarah will talk more about that. We have a unique combination of grantees who have received this funding, which I think will be very rich in producing some information for us to help inform the state of Connecticut long-term around our workforce planning. Also, there are employer partners that have been involved, and it was one of the main tenets of this program. And we do have a aspect to the RFP and the research that we would like to examine with our employer partners. I will say the meat and the heartiness around this is about our participants. And so in particular, the chart that you see on the screen, and hopefully it's large, I think it's large enough for everybody. If not, please let us know. And again, you'll have copies of this. But the components of the Career Connect program are listed there, quite robust. Our portal is our point of entry that all the students will go into. And again, my colleague will go over some of that in further detail when she's talking about the program. So looking forward to hearing that from Sarah. The sectors that we are working in are identified as the primary sectors for the state of Connecticut. Business services, construction, green jobs. Many of these are standard across many of our state partners across the country as large sectors that have high demand and high need. And then the demographics that this program is intended to serve. Of course, that's included but not limited to. Some of our grantees are focused on specific grantees. Others are across the board. But again, we'll be looking for robust feedback about how they have been impacted. Next slide. Okay, still me, just making sure. Oh, Laura, I think that's up to you now. Tried to break it up so you don't hear me just talking for the hour. Laura.
Thanks, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about eligibility and qualifications. So eligibility are all non-governmental entities. We do include for-profit and not-for-profit entities. The qualifications, we're really looking for individuals and companies with significant experience in evaluating grant-funded workforce development programs. That is what we are doing with Career Connect. It is a program that is working to serve marginalized populations. ARPA is COVID relief dollars. COVID severely impacted marginalized populations, and that was a huge target for this grant-funded program, and working with workforce development related data. We are also looking for entities which have a comprehensive understanding of workforce boards and community-based organizations. You'll see later on that those were the two real main areas of which the grants were distributed to. An understanding of engaging multiple stakeholders within a statewide workforce system, as well as major economic indicators, living wages, benefits cliffs, etc. I encourage you to take a good look at pages 11 and 12, where you will be able to submit the qualifications under the main proposal section. So those are the ones you want to pay attention to under the main proposal. Please note that once you get to attachments, declaration of confidential information, conflicts of interest, those particular sections do not count as your 10-page limit.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Can't get my R's out today. Our program manager for Career Connect. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this process of reviewing this project and all of its successes. So I'm just going to give the background around what Career Connect actually is. It is in 2021, the Connecticut legislature appropriated $70 million of our ARPA funds to fund this program. It is a flagship short-term training program model based on a nationally recognized best practice, which is called the Connecticut Manufacturing Pipeline Initiative. Career Connect was designed to enable unemployed and underemployed people, especially those whose employment was impacted by the pandemic, to acquire the skills for good jobs that support themselves and their families with financially sustaining wages. Just to repeat what Christina just alluded to, target populations include individuals who are historically underrepresented, BIPOC, women, veterans, opportunity youth, a reentry population, and individuals with disabilities. And we do have grantees who specifically focus on one or more of those populations. There are very flexible guardrails for eligibility that allow for many individuals not typically able to access training and supportive services to be part of the Career Connect program. The overall goal is to train 6,000 participants within the program timeframe through multiple pathways of short-term trainings, which are usually between 5 and 20 weeks, in fast-growing, in-demand labor sectors as informed by our industry employers. Next slide, please. So just a quick glance at the industry sectors in which training is available in these high-demand areas in Connecticut. Many of these if you've been in workforce development, you're going to be familiar with this. We have manufacturing, healthcare, bioscience, green energy and construction, information technology, social and human services, transportation, and miscellaneous industries, which include remote work, culinary programs that are focused specifically on refugee and immigrant women, and then retail, customer service, and hospitality, which are across other special populations. Next slide. To give you an idea, the Career Connect has a total of 16 grantees with 19 funded programs. 3 of our grantees have been awarded funding for 2 programs each. That's how we get the 19 out of 16. The state has 5 workforce development boards, 4 of which received funding. The balance of our grantees are community-based organizations that vary in size and scope. We have some community-based organizations that have long histories working in workforce development, while for others, this is their first foray into this area. We also have at least one that actually was created out of this grant opportunity. So it's a brand new nonprofit that's focusing on workforce development for the first time. So we really do have a wide variety of who is doing this work with us. So just a few of the program, or the main program components, I should say. What distinguishes Career Connect from other is its comprehensive design, from recruitment through job attainment, along with its focus on providing participants flexible supportive services funds and serving individuals, as mentioned, from historically underserved communities. Eligibility is participants must be 17 years of age and legal to work in the United States. They begin their experience by creating a profile in the Career Connect portal. The portal is a pilot single entry platform. The portal is a pilot single entry point platform that functions as a virtual front door to the workforce development, training, support, and employment for the individual. And as part of that process, they take an 18-question assessment that helps the career coaches that eventually pick them up to assess their needs, whether it's for supportive services or also for training needs. The career coaches, which are our grantees, staff at our grantees, they provide case management, job placement support, and supportive services to eliminate barriers to success. Supportive services can be anything from transportation, childcare, housing, food, technology, stipends, and any other service that the grantee has indicated or has identified as a need of their participants. In many cases, these supportive services are above and beyond other supportive services they may already be receiving through other programs. The trainings, as I have mentioned, are between 5 and 20 weeks, depending on the enrolled program, and they lead to industry recognized credentials or localized credentials that are informed and recognized by industry and employee partners. They're both sector-centric and soft skills for job readiness and are embedded in every program and training. Grantees work lockstep with identified employee industry partners, which I keep mentioning. In their application process, they actually had to identify the employers ahead of time. And they work with them not only for commitments to hire, but also assisting in job placement in other ways. So next slide, please. This is a very small sampling of our industry partners that are working with grantees at the moment. As you can see, they vary in size and scope. They provide all kinds of opportunities. Some are internships, some are apprenticeships, some is on-the-job training, on-the-job mentoring, and then also obviously employment, which is the ultimate goal. And I think that's my last slide.
Great. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. All right, moving right along. So now I am going to dig into the proposal outline, specifically the scope of services. Just as a matter of reference, the scope of services in the RFP does begin on page 6, just so that you have that as a reference point. And while I trust everyone has been through these processes before, you can see that we do, of course, ask some very common questions through an RFP. And I do want to acknowledge one coworker that is on the call with our Office of Policy, OPM, our Office of Policy Management, Rachel Leventhal-Wieners. Thank you so much for joining us today as well. And so some of this that you see on the screen, these particular components, I am not going to go into detail, as I trust that it is pretty clear in the RFP. Obviously, we'll want to know about the strengths and qualifications of the staff. We'll want to know about the staff that you would have on point to or have on hand to plan this work. Obviously, making sure folks have access to and an understanding of data and technology tools. We will have a data dictionary available for you, thanks to my colleague Jonathan Richter on the call. Put that together very early on. We will want to see your work plan, and we will want to see the work plan delivered using this table. And there's a convenient reason why we're doing that, which you all I would hope that the recipient of this awarded RFP will appreciate, because that will be how our contract with the provider is ultimately written. So our hope is to get a head start on that. So the work plan will be written out using that table of milestones, a time frame, and deliverables and activities. Obviously, we will want your work to align with our cultural competence and our statement around our DEI work for the state of Connecticut, the OWS office, of course. My colleague Christine will speak a little bit more later in this session around the budget. We do have a template for you to follow. And of course, we will want to see some of your key financials as would any RFP request for this scope of work, to have a good understanding of financial stability within your organization. So that's, again, the general. I'm just referring high level to what the proposal outline will look like. And now I'm going to go into scope of services. Thank you. So the scope of services is, and I actually want to acknowledge my colleagues on the call. There are a lot of components to this amazing work, and getting this RFP to where we are took a lot of time and effort of my colleagues, which I'm very appreciative of. And all of this was very much a collaborative approach. But we really wanted to make sure that the scope of service focuses on the core deliverables of what we want from you all. I'm just going to refer to whoever the recipient is. We do talk about the outcomes that we would like to learn about from our participants, or about our participants, as well as our grantees and our employers, with the emphasis on the primary emphasis on the participant outcomes. So I'm going to break that down a little further. Go ahead, Laura. Okay. I'm not going to read the slide to you, right? You can all read that. But one of the things that's going to be very important is that we have a good understanding of your work plan using that table that we mentioned before. We will want a firm understanding of how you plan to communicate with us. We will want to do some, not spot checks, but check-ins at regular intervals to see how things are going with participant outcomes, with any data collection, whatever, the information you need to provide us with a robust evaluation. Okay. And again, there are items that we refer you to in the RFP. an evaluation of grantee satisfaction. So, how have the folks that we've given funding to, how satisfied have they been with the program and its success for their organizations? So for example, talking to the organization in which this funding helped stand up their nonprofit, that now will continue thanks to being legislated into a budget line, that's a pretty significant impact for a grantee that didn't otherwise exist for this. So we'll want to understand maybe how that happened and really the depth of that. Also, when we talk about the grantee satisfaction, as my colleague pointed out, a very unique part of this program is that our funders were split between our workforce boards, right? We have 5 regional workforce boards here in the state of Connecticut, which some of you may be familiar with our setup. And then we also identified funding and provided funding to some community-based organizations, some smaller and some mid-size. So each of them will have had a different experience, and it'll be important for OWS to understand those experiences so that when we talk about building out our workforce development system, when we will in the next month or so, and we'll be having a strategic plan around workforce produced for the state that OWS has taken a significant lead in staffing and putting together with our governor's workforce council. How is the satisfaction from our grantees and our employers? How is that aligned with our strategic plans? That may also be something that will be of value for us to understand. Of course, we're looking for a summative report on the findings, and there's also some technical pieces that are part of this RFP that I think will help inform, and that is creating an aggregate data set of program participants, as well as some data digitization. I knew that word would not come easy, where applicable, of some of our forms that the grantees submitted. So that's sort of a housekeeping component to it. So again, those are the core deliverables that we will be looking for. I'm going to take a breath. Again, any questions, please put them either in the chat or hang on to them for the Q&A at the end. All right, I'm just going to advance my own slides here so I can look at my notes. Thank you, Laura. Okay. We really want to get a sense of the impact on our participants. So now I'm focused on the participants. And you'll see this slide is a little bit bigger than the grantees and the employers. As I said, this is a robust part of the evaluation. But first, we want to look at short-term outcomes, medium-term outcomes, long-term, and then longitudinal. All of our participants are entered into, and I hope I get the terminology here right. Many of my colleagues in the call correct me if I say it wrong, but all of our grantees are also entered into our Department of Labor Connecticut Hires platform, so that we do have the ability to track longitudinally by wage and wage growth. And that will be really important. In fact, just this morning, one of our grantees was like, are we going to get to learn about that? And we have some grantees that completed a year ago. So some of that data may already be available. And the evaluator looking at this program will be able to really provide that information to us in a robust manner. So we are looking, as you can see, again, short-term, medium, long-term, and longitudinal. I'm just going to leave that up there for a minute to folks to kind of get a grasp of. Again, that is in the RFP. I'll tell you what page. Page 8 as a reference. All right. So there is definitely some aspect of their satisfaction with the program and perceptions. Right. So, of course, how you choose to gather that information is what we will want to see in the RFP response. And then the medium-term outcomes, a lot of that is driven by data, as you can see. Again, some satisfaction, especially as they've ideally been trained and then placed, and kind of reconciling their satisfaction with that. And then, of course, as we get into long-term and longitudinal goals, it is definitely more data-driven. Okay. All right, thank you. And then, as you can see, this particular slide, I split it between grantee participants' outcomes, those that received fundings, and some employer outcomes for those that have engaged. And all of our grantees had to have an employer partner at the table. So kind of going the other direction, so going right to left, starting with employer. So part of what will be interesting to see and understand is for those employers who engaged at the onset of the grant application, how engaged are they 2 years, 3 years out? Some of our grantees had a 2-year contract, some 3. So how engaged are the employers 3 years out? And that's going to be very important to understand. Also making sure that the skills that we're trained for were indeed satisfactory to the employees and their job readiness. As we mentioned, one of the components of the program is it isn't just the training, but it's the wraparound support services, which was a hallmark of this program, much more flexible than WIOA dollars and other federal dollars. Our support services and wraparound services dollars were really used to help eliminate and remove and alleviate barriers. So did those barrier removals help them be successful in the workplace as well? So that's an important part. Okay, going over to grantee participants. Obviously, for the grantees, we will be interested in understanding. This is, I think, a really important part that once we got into, we were doing our evaluations with our grantees, their audits and site visits, is understanding the in-kind operations that many of our grantees put into this, both workforce boards and community-based organizations. So we will want to see some of that and understand that as well. Many of our workforce boards are co-enrolling participants. And again, I am absolutely taking for granted that all of you on this call understand all these acronyms. So if that is not accurate, please make sure you submit that as a question. But I'm assuming that there is a good understanding of workforce development and terminology on this call. So we will also want to understand how this grant maybe helped build capacity for organizations. And also if it helped them change the way they do things. Some of our grantees absolutely changed in our community-based organizations, report that they accelerated their training. Well, what did that do? How did that help? And why did they do that? So it'll be those are important factors that we do not have in-depth knowledge of, but we'll look to for this evaluation. And then, of course, helping to identify for our training programs that were established with Career Connect, are they now looking to identify additional funding? And what support do they need to do that? Okay. All right. I think I have one more slide, Laura. Nope. Okay. I am going to pause there and give my colleague Christine a heads up that, or Christine and Laura, I'm not sure if Christine's doing it or Laura.
I will. Thank you,
Oh,
Christina.
that's Christine. Thank you.
So the budget pieces RFP is pretty straightforward. Budgets must be submitted in the Excel format that we have provided. There's a screenshot here as well as in the RFP, but you can download the actual workable Excel file from CT Source. The budget should delineate all costs associated with the proposed services and should include a justification for each line. Make sure to please include each staff person that will be involved in the evaluation, along with a description of their duties, their hourly rate, and the estimated time that they'll be spending providing the proposed services. The budget submitted must cover the evaluation work from when the contract is executed through December 31st, 2026. And it should reflect the steps in your proposed work plan. And that's really it for the budget piece, the RFP. Just please make sure to use that provided Excel template for the budget.
And I will add, for Christine's sake, which I'm sure all of you have been the victim of this, to not change the formulas, right? So that's often but I know everyone on this call knows that and have probably all had similar experiences of, wait a minute, this doesn't add up, to realize someone changed the formulas. Okay. Laura, I think we are over to you.
Yep, of course I did it. Evaluation criteria and the weighting. This is all detailed right on page 14. This is a carbon copy directly out of page 14 of the RFP, and these are the things that we're looking for. I'm fairly certain it adds up to 100%. I surely hope. So your scope of services is worth 25% of the overall score. Again, this is really discussing how you're going to deliver these services to the OWS. Really goes hand in hand with item number 2, your project management plan. This work plan is super important. We really want to understand the milestones and the time frame of each of those milestones to accomplish them. Your organizational profile, strengths, and qualifications of the agency. Again, that we talked about that a little bit before. This is a whole section that we're really looking to see your experience in workforce development programming, your experience around marginalized populations, your experience around workforce data, your staffing plan. Who are we going to be working with? What are their levels of experience? What are their qualifications? Your cultural competencies, 10% demonstration of past work with diverse populations and clients. This is a great one for your references that must be submitted during the RFP process, during the proposal process. Budget, narrative, and financial profile, 10%. This is, again, the clear description of costs and hourly rates. This should very clearly crosswalk to your scope of services and your project management plan. We don't want someone popping up on the staffing plan that's not on your staffing plan, or not on your budget, but not on your staffing plan, or vice versa. And lastly, data and technology for 5%. This is experience around workforce platforms, data sets, and concepts. And again, your reference page there is page 14. I believe the last slide for me is some of those key important dates. Of course, August 29th, you all wouldn't be here if that date hadn't already passed. Today is our one and only bidders conference. We will be, of course, recording it, and we will be reposting this back on not only the CT Source website, but also our OWS website, portal.ct.gov/GWC. The next big important deadline of note is, of course, the deadline for questions. All questions must be submitted directly to Christina Testabuzzi, whose email is in the chat and all over the RFP. All questions are going to be submitted to her. If there are duplicate questions from multiple proposers, we're going to go ahead and aggregate those together. We may paraphrase loosely, but the point is to get all the questions together all at once. We're not going to release who asked what questions. We're just going to go ahead and aggregate them all together, provide answers, and send them back out as a post on CT Source and a post to our website. Please note that this will result in an addendum for you to sign. So let's just say, for example, no questions come in, and therefore we are not releasing any answers. This addendum will not be necessary. I don't anticipate that to happen. That's not happened one single time for any RFP we've ever released. So I do anticipate that there will be an addendum to be on the lookout for. I believe Christine can correct me if I'm wrong, but you will get notified when an edit is made on CT Source. So you'll be able to get notified that the addendum is posted, but please look online no later than Friday, September 27th at 5 p.m. If there are any changes to that schedule, we would, of course, try to do our best to communicate outwards, but we are tracking very, very closely to that deadline. And then last but not least, the big, most important deadline is the proposal due date. That is Friday, October 11th, 5 p.m. Again, all proposals and subsequent items are to be submitted directly to Christina's email. There's a couple things that are not necessarily going to be emailed to her, and I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. So additional submission requirements. Page 3 definitely talks about some of the additional items that are required to be submitted. Some of this is now a straight up update in CT Source. For example, the notification to bidders, parts 1 through 5, is something to be filled out in CT Source. That's fairly new. We got a lot of questions about this the last RFP that we ran. So please take a look at your profile in CT Source. I don't know what it did to trigger those items for you. So please go ahead and take a look back there. And you're going to also want to submit the OPM Ethics Form 1. It is your campaign contribution certification. If you are missing any of these items during the proposal stage, if it's those type of items, not your main proposal, not your budget, if you're missing the signed addendum, if you're missing the notification to bidder, if you're missing the OPM Form 1, we are going to review and give you a chance to send it back. So we just want to make sure that everybody is clear that we are going to review each for completeness, and anyone who's missing stuff, we're going to give you a chance to turn that information back in. We really want to review as many complete profiles as possible. It will be a very short turnaround time, so please check your emails very carefully. Other than that, I think the only other real important stuff in here is there are some very specific guidelines. As you've already heard, I've mentioned the main proposal piece being no more than 10 pages in length, but that gives you all sorts of information in the RFP about font size and margins and those types of things. As well as there's a whole cover page that must be submitted with all of your company's information. Big red note at the bottom, no CT Source submissions. I'll say it one more time. All submissions must be submitted directly to Christina Testabuzzi, with the exception of the things that are already loaded in CT Source, like that notification to bidders item.
All right. Thank you, Laura. All right, just making sure I'm off mute. Thank you. So we did, I appreciate my colleagues who spoke. We did go through this in the 45 minutes that we were anticipating, so thank you. And I do want to open the floor for any questions that you may have. The other piece of it is, if we don't have an answer, or if we want to make sure we give a thoughtful answer to your question rather than an on the spot, we will make sure to acknowledge that and get those answers to you. Thank you, Laura. So yes, if anyone's joined late, please make sure you put your name, company, and email in the chat. Of course, it will be recorded on the Zoom as well. So I'd like to open it up. I'm sure somebody has a question.
I'm going to go ahead and stop
Recording,
sharing.
please. Yes. Yep.
Stop screen sharing, and I'm going to put you all on the spot and go back to gallery view. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, you're welcome to email Christina Testabuzzi and we'll aggregate it up with the rest.
The teacher in me likes to give a solid 5 minutes before we say we're good.
For a long time. I don't know. How about 2 minutes? I don't know.
2 minutes. I saw James. Thank you.
James.
And, James, I saw your hand move, so I will absolutely happy to call on you. If you can use the, not James necessarily, but use the raise hand function just in case I don't see you. James, go ahead, please.
Just a technical question. The digitization of forms scared me a little bit. Like, is there any sense you can give us of the volume of digitization and what form they're in? Are they like handwritten things filled out by individual participants, or what? Are we talking like 8,000 forms or 200 forms? That could be
So we will get that as a question that I do want to make sure we follow up on. Not that I'm hiding anything, not that we don't know that, or not that we don't want to share that number, but what we do want to do is be clear from each of our grantees what their individual situation is so that we can have a total number for that. So that will certainly, as we'll note it, and we'll make sure that that is answered in the responses. Absolutely. Thank you, James. Yes, Shelley.
So you have a start date for December 2025. I'm wondering if that's a typo or if you are planning to not start the evaluation until next year.
Oh, no.
Oh, no is right. You all know how many times people look at these things before you publish them, right? It would be December.
That would be a typo.
That would be a typo.
With the
Okay.
ARPA funds, all projects must be obligated by December 31st, 2024. So we must be executed. We must have a PO in hand as soon as possible, not to mention we're ready to roll. So 2025 is a typo. I'm so sorry, everyone.
That's what I thought. So then
So-
it's a 2-year evaluation,
Yeah,
then, correct?
2-year term.
Yes.
All right, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that, Shelley. I'm sure many of folks had that question, or if not, would have shortly.
I was brave.
Thank you.
Thank
It's all
you.
about being brave.
I do have another one.
Yes, please.
Have there or will there be additional grantees or programs added between now and 2026, or is this the group?
This is the group.
And then I have one more.
Please go for it.
The participant data from which the evaluation is to be conducted, is that back from the inception, back in 2022? Are we polling several years going back that far?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, that's it.
And I will say, in full transparency, the grant was the grants were, what's the word I'm looking for?
Executed.
Executed in that at that time period in 2022, but many of our grantees did not receive a contract. As you know, working with a state agency can always be exciting. And so some of those contracts may not have initiated until a few months in. So it might be give or take a few months.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen we've kept almost everybody, and actually I know one of my colleagues had to jump off, but we've kept everybody's attention for the entire time, and nobody has left just yet. So I'm grateful for that. If there are no more questions, does an entity need a Connecticut business license before submitting a proposal? Thank you for that question. I may have to defer to Lindsay or Laura if you know the answer to that off the top of your head.
I'm not entirely sure of the answer. Let us return to you on that question.
Very important. That's because I have a feeling there are many of you that are from outside of Connecticut, just in looking at the organization. So thank you for that question, Eduardo.
Mr. Barnum?
Yes.
Yeah, it might be a close read might get the answer to this, but I think the question of the data on all the outcomes, you referred to the wages, sounded like you were referring to them coming from CT hires. So I'm assuming all these individuals that participated from day one are in CT hires, and then it sounds like there's an automatic link to the wage file to populate wage data in CT hires, or is that correct? To get that wage data by participant, because I just wondered how much scraping around we'll have to do at all 19 or all 16 contractors. Are they all recording these outcomes in their individual different databases of ETO and everything, or are all these outcomes coming into a central point to be downloaded to us to evaluate, to analyze?
Thank you, James. That's a very fair question, and I can give some initial response. So the Career Connect portal does have all of our participant data. All participants are required to be in CT hires by our grantees place them in CT hires, which is and I want to make sure I get the terminology here right, Laura, that the CT hires data is then accessible through our Department of Labor work. Jonathan, is that an accurate explanation? So the Department of Labor would have that wage data, and there's a wage match that we can do. Is that accurate?
Yeah, precisely. And our office holds all of the programmatic data. So we're not the ones, like, we have all the programmatic data, and there wouldn't be any time to scrape or anything. So.
And again, we'll provide some additional clarity and some additional context for that question in the Q&A response.
Yeah. And the reference to P20 win, is that aspirational that I mean, are we going to be interacting with and working with you to integrate this data into P20Win, or are you already integrated in there? Or is that just an aspiration to eventually integrate with P20Win with all the other agency data that's in there, other agency data that's in there?
It's my understanding that we will be utilizing P20Win where we can. We do have a lot of manual files as well, but it is our understanding that we are going to be using P20Win. But we also seek the knowledge of those on the call on how the best way to go about longitudinal data
Okay.
can be collected.
Great.
Thank you. There was a question in the chat, just to confirm the third-party evaluator will be compensated via ARPA funding. Laura, can you confirm that?
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay. Last call. I'll put my auctioneer hat on, going once. Going twice. David, was that a hand up or hesitation?
Hesitant. Not to belabor this about the data, it's quite easy to link. It usually comes down to permissions to use and security arrangements and that kind of thing. But do I understand, Jonathan, that you have individually identified data for everybody who enrolled in the program, like a date of birth, a name, an SSN, and then that links to your P20 system with your state UI wage and earnings data? Is that right?
The first part is correct, but we'll have to follow up on just the main sort of wage matching process. But yeah, we have all identifiers, and we collect that quarterly basis, stored in secure location, of course. But unlocking that next step of acquiring the wage information is something that I can follow up on.
Great. Two things just real quick on that. There's 18 questions on this baseline information intake form. Does that include, and are they reliably complete, all the demographics that you want? And are people populating that? Is that all like reliably there in those 18 questions at baseline when somebody comes in?
In order to participate in programming, those have to be completely filled out. Yeah.
Okay. So you'll have like age, race, gender, education, blah, blah, blah for sure. Okay. Great. Because what I would like to do ideally then is, if you have longitudinal data set, have baseline pre-earnings and post-earning, you know what I mean? But for that would need a good wage match to your P20 system or your state UI in another format.
Yep.
So my auctioneering style worked. So going once. Going twice. Okay.
Great.
Third time's a charm. Thank you all for joining us. I hope to see proposals and you come through, and would be excited to see your name in my inbox. Thank you.
Thank you.